Good morning, afternoon, evening from wherever you're joining. I know we have a pretty wide audience today from what we've seen on the registered list. So people joining from all over. So I will set up my screen share, which will also set up the stage for what we're going to be talking about today. I'll go through that right before we kick off and do that introduction, but give you guys something to look at as opposed to a giant talking head. The other thing, if you are paying very close attention, I do have my Collate shirt on and I have my Claude thinking cap. So really attuned to what I'll be talking about today, Claude MCP and then the AskCollate feature, calling out both. I have swag from both, so I'm not taking any side whatsoever, trying to keep this as neutral as possible and just show where you can use Collate for certain objects and functions and where you would want to use something like Claude to help you get things done today. Looks like in the chat we have a big European presence today. Europe, Vienna, Switzerland, all great places. I'm sure it's pretty chilly out there, Bristol as well. And then we have some people from California, Bay Area, and Austin, Texas. I'm joining from Orlando, Florida. So it is sunny always over here as usual. All right. I think that is critical mass. So today, thank you all for joining us again. What we want to cover today is thinking about our new AskCollate feature. I believe the last 30 at 30 was very focused on just AskCollate, and we walk through a specific use case. So if you missed it and want to know more about AskCollate, go to our YouTube channel and watch that one as well as past videos and past 30 at 30 sessions. So a great, resource. But some of the questions we got during that session, some of the questions we got after that session is, hey, Joe, what is the difference between that and using Claude's MCP? And it's a great question. There is a lot of overlap for sure. It's not an either or question, but there are going to be areas where AskCollate outperforms or does better in certain tasks than Claude. But with that being said, there's going to be cases that you're going to want to use Claude, really thinking about extending out, using it for deeper research, using it for your context specific related tasks to your organization that it might strive in today. So what I'm going to do today is just a little bit of a bake-off, if you will, where I'm going to ask both of them pretty much the same prompts. I might divert here and there based off what they give me, but then we're going to say, hey, this is something that Collate did really well, or hey, this is where Claude really excelled in this type of task. So again, going to try going side by side with them both next to each other and keeping it as consistent as possible. So the first thing I'm going to do is throw a little bit of a curveball at both of them, and I'll explain why it's a curveball. So I have find me client tables in Redshift, and then I have find me client tables in Redshift. So they're both going to think about it. I have my thinking cap on, so I'm thinking about it too. But the reason this is a little bit of a curveball is because client tables don't exist in either one of these instances. So in Collate, we do not have any client tables. In Claude, in Collate, we're connecting to, we do not have any client tables either. So what this is going to do is it's showing me customer tables. So a little bit of a gold star there for Collate. We were able to get that semantic understanding that, hey, customers means Collate, and thinking, or customers means client and client means customer. So thinking that there is that interchangeability there is incredibly important. And we talked about them a little bit deeper on what they mean. So, hey, this didn't find any Redshift. Let me try a broader search for what configured. There's nothing set up. And then I can say, let's look for customer tables instead. So again, it didn't get that semantic context when it searched because all this did was a direct search within Collate for customer, which it didn't come up with. Versus our AskCollate was able to get that semantic understanding that was there. And again, now we were able to find some of those tables that we're seeing here in Redshift and bridge that gap accordingly. I'm going to focus on this first customer table, and I'm going to ask for additional details. So here I'm asking for additional details on the customer table. That's tier 2. So I'm adding a little bit of information. I think it was the first option showed. I'm then going to say, within the DBT alpha schema, let's view that customers table. So here it's actually pulling up this customer table. I can see the summary of it. I can see the schema, and it's really nice from a visual standpoint. Where this is getting me the details of this, it's showing me the Joe Perez, it's showing me the silver and the tier two, and all of that information. So it's surfacing the same information from a detail standpoint. It's just presenting it in a different manner. So neither is right and neither is wrong. It's really just coming down to usability. And what I really like about Collate here from a usability is I get the summary. I see this all nicely laid out. If I cared about data quality, I wouldn't have to prompt for a whole nother element. I can just click here on data quality and understand it. Or if I cared about lineage, I can just click here and understand it first having to go into an additional prompt. And I think lineage is a really good example where I can then go and ask that question, help me view the impact of bad data downstream. I'm going to do the same question here. So again, thinking about it from a lineage point of view, both are going to be able to do the impact analysis, but it's how that information is presented, which is going to be so critical to getting things done. So here it calls out the data quality. It shows me some different things. It talks about number of open incidences, and then it also calls out the upstream dependencies and then the downstream dependencies as well. So the affected systems here is really powerful. And then of course it gives me a little critical concern. The most serious issue is the first test failure showing the table only has 110 instead of 10,000. So again, doing some research on concerns and doing that downstream. Now, on the MCP side of things, I did max out that session when I connected to Collate. So it looks like Timothy did call that out in the chat. That's just due to me not praying to the demo gods enough on this. Let me try starting a new conversation as requested and say, try picking up where we left off. I guess that's another pro for the AskCollate. We're not going to hit those thresholds in the same way that your Claude MCP, depending on what Claude license you have. As you can tell, I only have Pro and not the Max. So it is going to ponder and take a look and do that search and then perform the impact analysis. If we open up the tools for Collate, we can actually see what options are available here. So it's going to have the root cause analysis. It's going to have the create test case. It's going to have the create lineage and different elements like that. I'm going to feed this a little bit more and say Redshift prod dbt underscore alpha schema customers table and see if that's enough context for it. And this is where I bang the computer a little bit and then I say allow always. So it's getting the entity lineage and hopefully that works. And then I'm going to continue over here, just getting some things done. What are some good data quality practices I should adhere to? So I had the misspelling, but AI is smart enough to know that I mean data quality. Here I'm just asking a generic statement. It's going to pull from Collate context if it's there, but it's going to also, in certain cases, call out and limit certain functions. So this isn't going to be a full-on research tool where I can say, what's the weather in Santa Fe? It's going to give me the answer of, hey, I can't do that. I can only help that reframes this comment's access. So really thinking about control and misuse here. Claude over here finally got me the downstream dependency. The new view is that table with these certain elements, but then I can ask this, hey, what are some good data quality practices I should adhere to? And this is going to maybe tackle this problem a little bit differently and really be able to pull from a variety of things. So where AskCollate might be a little bit more controlled, really thinking about the context of the catalog and thinking about governance. Claude is going to be able to give me foundational governance, testing validation, and all of these different elements that might work. And again, this is just one of those scenarios where, AskCollate did really well in discovering the assets within Collate, showing me the impact analysis and doing things like that. But when it came to some of these other areas, like what are some good data quality practices I should adhere to, we did get a little bit more performance from a Claude MCP. And then thinking about some other things that I really like is I have it with my drive search set up. So I can say, find me client information or domains in Google Drive. So I can really switch that context up within Claude and then be able to find that here, where again, I'm really focusing on just things within Collate, where I can say, what glossary terms do I have available? And then I can see these results and I can see that client domain doc, and I can even open it in my other one where I can then have what that looks like. And I can say, let's analyze that Claude, that client domain in greater detail. And again, getting off the Collate side of things, but different tasks and activities that I can do on my Collate side, it's giving me some glossary terms and different context that's there. So really just pulling and comparing where these things can go. It's calling out that it's very minimal. It defines the domain definition in the table. Ownership, it's telling me things I can add. But again, thinking about context that is across different types of systems, this is where you might want to use Claude. And then the last thing I can do is going back to that data quality example is I can say, let's create a data quality test for that original customers table. And then I'm going to ask the same thing as our last one before I open it up to questions. My bad. Need to turn on my data observability mode. And now if I say, let's create a quality test for that original customer table, we should be in business. And here it's getting the test definitions that are available. Here it's getting the test definitions that are available. They're invoking similar processes or activities here, and we'll just see what happens. It's looking at specific fields like customer ID and customer lifetime value that have a lot of curation or key elements. Here it's still fetching, and now it's creating some comprehensive data quality tests for the customer tables, and it's setting it up for some key dimensions. Just different use cases and seeing how they both think independently. I hope I didn't time out on my Collate side. And right now it's adding a freshness test. Just different operations, thinking about how they tackle them in different ways. And we're seeing that it adds it here. So it looks like I did not put enough on either side. And this is also giving me the tokens. So let me actually just go back in and say, let's create a data quality test for our customers table in Redshift. And this is just adding some context. I wish this one paused a little bit and just didn't create and had a, hey, are you sure you want to do this? We're going to see in a few moments that the Ask Collate is going to ask me before it does certain activities. So just thinking about how the two things exist, and it's going to check for existing, suggest types, and guide you. So I'm going to say, let's ensure that customer lifetime value is always positive for the first table. So added this test suite, and then this is what's in place: row count validation, freshness check, schema validation, and other things. Where this is a little bit more asking what I want to do. And again, I made that mistake of not putting it on the observability mode. So let me try that now with the observability mode. And as this runs in the background, that was the last command I wanted to hit. Really want to open up to questions. Haven't seen anything in the chat or Q&A, but feel free to either come off or raise your hand and come off mute, or drop it in the chat and we can address it live for the next 10 or so minutes. It looks like there are some Q&As in the background. So what does AskCollate send back to LLMs on the back end? How do I ally the security concerns about using my AskCollate environment? For that, I would say we follow the industry best practices when it comes to a lot of these things. We're never training on your data or sending your data to our LLMs. It's looking at your metadata and components like that. We use things like Amazon Bedrock to ensure security and compliance. And we can go into a little bit more detail on what that looks like offline. So feel free to drop me an email and we can talk about some of those security things once we're under our NDA and all that. We have some security documents that we can also share. So great question. Simple answer is we follow the best practices, leveraging existing technologies. And it looks like there was 2 duplicates of this early on. So gonna just mark those as complete. Other questions. I think I missed earlier when the session when you connected to Claude to the MCP server. I did not show that, Timothy, just for the sake of time. So what we did is I just have my connector here, and we have some documentation that maybe one of us can drop in the chat for you on how we can set our MCP server up with Collate. But it is fairly easy. Right now, I think we have documentation for Claude and Goose. If you're using another MCP, let us know and we'll see how we can support. Those are the big 2 that we've seen in the field, hence the documentation for it. So again, let us know what we can do there. Other questions. Oh, I do have some more in Q&A. Sorry, there is a lot to monitor here. Okay. So yes, from a data privacy standpoint, the AskCollate is both AskCollate and the MCP is going to respect your users' permissions and privacy. So I'm not sure how aware it is, but I've seen in past when I am the owner of a specific table, it actually says, hey, you're the owner, that's you. So it knows that I'm Joe Joseph and my user talks about my roles, and it's going to respect for things like this. So if I have access to this table or this data in Collate, then it's going to respect that. Similarly, when you set up the MCP for Claude, you're going to be using your personal access token, and that again is going to respect your permissions and privacy. So in both instances, it is aware of what you are able to do and what you're not able to do, Dotan. So there's 2 questions that came in the Colon. How can I play with AskCollate? That is coming in our next release, which should be available in the coming weeks. I'm not sure about the exact timeline, but it's just right around the corner. If you are a Collate customer, reach out to your account team. And if you have Collate AI, we can get you set up and start playing around and start using AskCollate. There was another question in the Q&A. Does Gronk have an integration with MCP? I do not know specifically if Gronk has an integration with MCP. I know that the big ones I'm aware of are Copilot, Claude, Goose, as well as DeepSeek that have the MCP support. I'm not sure about Gronk specifically, but it goes back to that principle of, hey, if it does support MCP, we will be able to integrate it. We might require some support on our side just to get things stood up and what that one-to-one relates to. But yes, we do have that support. And it feels like there's new MCPs and models coming out every single week, so hard to keep up even with my thinking cap. We are at 26, so I did just want to do a quick wrap up on what we covered. AskCollate is incredibly powerful and effective for finding assets within your platform that you've ingested, seeing things like lineage or creating data quality tests with the specific context. And I think really the powerful thing is being able to visualize a lot of these elements text oriented. So I think those are a specific driver. Where we saw some really great stuff coming from Claude's MCP is some of those wider questions of thinking outside of the context and assets within the platform. So really thinking about, hey, tell me about data quality, or what are some practices I should follow that might not be directly specific to Collate. We really saw that. So it's not an either or. it's not use Claude or use AskCollate. I think there's going to be different use cases, and I think it really boils down to use AskCollate and Claude, just like how you might use Complexity for one thing, Claude for another, and ChatGPT. It's similar with AskCollate. It's just another tool in your stack, and you always want to be using the right tool for the right job. So appreciate all the questions, appreciate all the engagement, and everyone for joining on a Friday from what seems to be around the world. Stay tuned for the next 2 weeks and the recording to come out after this. If you have any topics, feel free to email us and let us know what you're interested in seeing. We're always trying to have these geared and relevant towards what you guys are seeing and experiencing and how we can make these better. So again, thanks again for joining, and a happy Friday.